now 5:01. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Canton Board of Trustees. Could we have a roll call, Michael?
All right. Mr. Anthony.
Present.
Foster.
Good evening.
Graham Hudak.
Good evening.
Segrist, present. Slavens.
Good evening.
Snyderman.
Here, sir.
Sir. And Will.
Hello. Okay, would like to call for approval or call for a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of 3 RBAs related to the November election.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Michael.
Anthony.
Yes.
Foster.
Aye.
Graham Hudak.
Aye.
Segrist, aye. Slavens.
Aye.
Snyderman.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All
Okay,
right.
so which order do you want to go through, Michael, or you just want to go ahead and present a motion and then you can tell us a little bit about it and then we'll vote on each item if there's no discussion or after the discussion.
Yeah, if you'll give me that freedom, I will go ahead and do that. I've also promoted Canton Police Department to panelists, so they should be ready to go. I want to make sure I can share screen. I'm going to make, Chad, I'm going to make you, Chad Baugh, I'm going to make you a co-host. Just like I did before, in case there's an issue with sharing screen. Okay. So the first agenda item, I had emailed out to every board member. Hopefully you have a copy of that, and those will be in the official minutes, and they'll be posted online after this meeting. I have 3 items that are all relatively emergency election purchases that kind of came out of discussions about our analysis of the primary election that was conducted 2 weeks ago. These are all things that we need for the November election. The first item I've got is consider approval of budget adjustments and purchases related to the November 3rd election. And this is a modification of an existing blanket purchase order that was approved in January by the Board of Trustees that we use for Dominion, which is the vendor who has manufactured the equipment that we use. I would like it increased by $4,000 to cover anticipated software support needed for the November presidential election. It has been determined that additional support and resources are needed for the November presidential election due to a 264% increase in mail voting compared to the previous presidential election cycle. This would be in the form of 3 motions. The first being to approve the staff Dominion to have a designated employee in the township supporting our absentee counting on election day. The second would be the budget adjustment to pay for that. And then the third is going to be the purchasing of a workstation for the purposes of adjudicating ballots, which is where we had a bottleneck on August, and also to purchase directly from Canon a scanner, a digital scanner, so that we have one for backup in case the scanner goes down like it did in August. The reason we are going with Canon as opposed to Dominion is it is 50% of the cost if we go directly with Canon as opposed to the vendor. So if it's appropriate, Mr. Supervisor, I will make the first motion. I move to approve the increase of PO number presented by $4,000 and approve the purchase of on-site support staff for the November 3rd election in the amount of $4,000 from Dominion Voting.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, Michael, do we have anybody online in the audience who needs to be added to the meeting at this point? Or is there any public comment on this item? Are there any raised hands in the public on this item?
I see nothing.
No public comment on this item. Are there any board questions or comments for Michael at this time?
I would just ask Michael, where does this fit in your overall budget? Like, is it going to end up putting you over budget? Do you have a special budget for elections versus the overall clerk's budget?
So yeah, the clerk's office, I'm responsible for kind of crafting two budgets. One is the clerical budget, clerk's budget, and which is 215, and then we have 262, which is the elections budget. Every dollar we are moving with the second motion will be coming out of the elections. So we're staying in elections. We've got some room for modification. I went through each item, figured out where we're at, which is, we've run 2 out of our 3 elections. So I've got a pretty good idea of where we're falling on expenses. In some areas, we've saved some money. Clearly, we have not been engaging in a substantial amount of overtime because we've had people furloughed in the past. We've had people in the work share, and we have kind of changed the management structure of the clerk's office. Additionally, we had 5 TPOAM employees, 5 clerical employees who had been temporarily assigned to the clerk's office. And so that allowed us to increase our capacity and not require a substantial amount of overtime. So when you see some of the budget adjustments that we'll be doing to pay for some of this, it's going to be coming out of individual funds that we're not going to realize expenses out of. Now, the board approves the budget at the fund level, so not at the individual item level. So I don't technically need to bring this before the board, which the director of finance told me earlier today when we were starting. But so no, we should be good with the elections budget. Additionally, we were 100% reimbursed for the March election by the state of Michigan. It's a 6-figure reimbursement, and that will be hitting the general fund at the end of the year. That will not be going back into my budget. But those expenses were budgeted, right? The purchasing of envelopes, the we had a LaJoy group brought in, we had a staffing company support us with 2 individual staff members in March. A lot of the overtime we billed the state of Michigan, and by proxy, I think the political parties for running the presidential preference primary.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Those good answers.
Any additional questions or comments for Michael? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote on the first?
Anthony.
Yes.
Foster.
Aye.
Graham Hudek.
Aye.
Siegerstein, Slavens.
Aye.
Snyderman.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye. Call for second motion on the item?
All right. Supervisor, I move to approve the budget, the transfer of funds as follows: $4,000 from the account number listed for capital outlay computers to the account number listed for professional and contractual services.
Support.
Thank you, Diane. It's purely a technical thing. Call for a roll call vote on this second motion.
Anthony.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Graham Hudek.
Aye.
Siegerstein, Slavens.
Aye.
Snyderman.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye. Third motion?
Mr. Supervisor, I move to approve the purchase of additional hardware and software to assist in the processing of absentee ballots in the amount of $2,675.40 for an additional adjudication workstation from Dominion Voting and $5,300 for a backup Canon scanner, producing a total of $7,975.40, but not to exceed $8,500 for shipping, taxes, or unforeseen fees out of existing funds in the account number listed.
Support.
Thank you, Diane. Roll call vote on the third motion.
Anthony.
Yes.
Foster.
Aye.
Graham Hudek.
Aye.
Slavens.
Aye.
Snyderman.
Aye.
Williams.
Next RBA.
All right, next one is the consider approval of blanket purchase order increase. Unexpected costs and increased demand has created a need for additional supplies. The clerk's office is requesting that a blanket PO number listed for printing and publishing general assigned to the vendor Printing Systems Incorporated be increased by $2,000 utilizing existing funds out of the budget. So this is budgeted funds. We just need to increase the PO. This is for the purchase of additional envelopes. We have more people voting absentee than we have had in the past, and the reimbursements aren't keeping up with our expenses. Funds are currently available inside the budget for this purchase. You approved this in January, and I just can't increase this without going back to you. So, Mr. Supervisor, I move to approve the increase of blanket PO number listed for printing and publishing general assigned to the vendor Printing Systems Incorporated be increased by $2,000 utilizing existing funds in the account number listed.
Support.
Thank you, Diane. Are there any additional new participants in the meeting that need to be added to the meeting?
No, I see Lieutenant Kennedy, I see Michigan Indian Defense Commission, I see Eva Davis from the library, welcome. I see a candidate, I see Amy Houston, and I see the letter A. So I don't see anybody that needs to be upgraded that I know of.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Is there any public comment on this item? Any raised hands, Michael?
No raised hands.
Very good. Is there any board questions or comments? It's pretty straightforward. More envelopes. Do the uptick in absentee. Okay. Call for a roll call vote on the item.
Anthony,
Yes.
Foster,
Aye.
Graham Hudek,
Aye.
Segrist, Slavens,
Aye.
Snyderman,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye. There was a single motion in that RBA? Good. Okay.
Yes.
Next, the labor contract. Last one or the additional item for tonight?
All right. This is consider approval of emergency staffing assistance. The clerk's office has continually utilized and continues to offer increased utilization of any TPOAM or merit employee that seeks additional hours. However, as with past elections, this extra assistance is not typically enough to meet a historic demand placed on the clerk's office in relation to the November 3rd general election and the COVID-19 pandemic. Clerk's office is requesting the ability and finances to continue to utilize a staffing company to fill the gap and meet its legal deadlines. I went over earlier that we've historically used LaJoy Group. We have not received a quote from them. I have three. I had reached out for 3 quotes. I have not had LaJoy Group reach back to me. So I'm going to ask that we move forward with the second quote here because it's reasonable in that kind of ballpark. And we need this option now. So that's kind of where we're at with this. Motion to, so Mr. Supervisor, I move to establish a blanket PO and approve the utilization of staffing services from Express Employment in Livonia for an amount not to exceed $50,000 to assist in preparation for the November 3rd general election, utilizing existing funds from the budget, from the fund presented.
Support.
Is there any public comment or raised hands? Any public comment on this item?
I see none.
Okay. Any board questions or comments on this item for Michael? Go ahead, Summer.
Hey, just a quick question, Michael. I apologize if you mentioned this in your introduction and I missed it. Is this something that we can use some of the furloughed employees for?
So what the plan for the clerk's office is to, I met with HR. This is potentially like a security measure right now. We clearly have some staffing issues. We've had some with the beginning of COVID-19, and we have been at a decreased capacity organization-wide, right? You have different departments that have been operating at different levels. We've had our continuing part-time people on layoff for quite some time. Now, we did get our continuing part-time person back for the August election, but that is not the case now. That said, we've had TPOAM members or we've had clerical employees in the office due to some kind of retirements. We have a smaller amount now than we had for the August election. And the clerk's office, HR is working, human resources is working with the clerk's office to ensure that individuals who are still in the work share will be able to volunteer their time, use their time. In the past, it was just their paid time off that they were kind of allowed to use. And I think that the new proposal is that we allow people to come in both for a PTO day, which is, there's only a few people left who are taking that, to be honest. A lot of people are back now. And then, but also they'll have the option of doing their furlough day as well in the clerk's office. But what we're looking for is a commitment that they stick with us till November, because if we can't get a commitment that they'll be with us, because essentially what I'm looking for is getting them trained by the Bureau of Elections to actually do election related work. And I can't have 20 people going in and out of the clerk's office offering me 4 to 5 hours every couple of weeks, because I need that consistency, because we have to train them, get them access. They have to have security access, because they're going to be working, they would be working inside the voter database. And believe it or not, especially now with what goes on with foreign governments and things like that, the security clearance is much higher than it used to be for getting inside of the voter file and working inside the voter file and issuing ballots and all of that stuff. So what we're looking for is some kind of consistency. And if we can get that, that would be fantastic. We're going to do that. So the first option is to offer that for the clerical employees. The next option would be to offer that for merit employees as well, who are in the same situation. And if we're unable to meet that demand, that's when we would reach out to the staffing company and bring people in permanently and have them work until election day. Clearly, I don't want to money paying people while we have people furloughed and laid off. It seems almost absurd. And, I kind of, was interested in potentially paying some of our laid off employees, but it looks like that's not an option. So I can't have them assigned to the clerk's office. They will remain on layoff. I will have this as an option to use for staffing. I just, don't like spending more money. I don't like spending more money paying people from outside the organization to come in to work than it would be for people who are inside the current organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions for Michael at this time? Okay, seeing none, call for a roll call vote on the item.
Anthony.
Yes.
Foster.
Aye.
Graham Hudek.
Aye.
Eberstein. Slavens.
Aye.
Snyderman.
Aye.
Williams.
Hi. Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Now we'll move on to the study session. Excuse me. We have Chad Baugh, our Director of Police Services, with us with his team. Chad, what we'd like to do is turn the meeting over to yourself. Is it possible to get Chad set up as like the main screen view?
Yes. Yep, we have, I believe they are prepared to take over the shared screen and should be able to play the audio and go through the PowerPoint presentation. So they'll take it away when they're ready.
Okay, Chad, if you're ready, lead us.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everyone, the participants from the land of Zoom. I appreciate all of that. We have 3 people here in front of you. One is myself. I'm the Chief of Police here in Canton. We have the Deputy Chief of Police here in Canton. Next to me, to my right, Craig Wilshire, and our Police Legal Advisor to my left, Brett Numchuff. And I want to thank all the participants in the organization to put together this study session. It's kind of cumbersome to some degree when you look at the 2 different items we're speaking of. We're putting together a proposal for the board to consider, and we wanted to provide context of how a body-worn camera system works and an in-car camera system works in comparison to what we have today. Our systems they're done, to be honest with you. They don't work for us anymore, and we'll talk about that. Then we also want to talk about some of the stats and the data behind the Canton Police Department and where we are at as a police department, and thinking about our police department as a constitutionally based progressive police department. And one of the key jobs I have is to ensure a foundation of public trust, excellent police service, and an inclusive community that understands that the presence of justice exists with our police department. You're going to see a lot of information. We are definitely not here to provide all the answers, but in short, we want to be part of the solution, and we have been part of the solution. We are leaders in the Western Wayne County when it comes to police departments. As we go through, I'm having problems here. If Barb, you can click. Anyway, we will find answers and we'll be part of the system. We had sent out to the board some of the items, the study session packet, and we're going to break down some of that information tonight. You have to think of our police department, and what we provide is solid training, oversight, and we engage our community for the development of trust. That's where authority comes from, is public trust. And you're going to see something a little bit different in our organization and I won't steal a lot of Brett's thunder, but our education system for our officers is a little bit different what you'll see throughout the state. There's only a few agencies that have what we have, and we have that because we've been given license to be leaders, and it comes through the board through people. So I appreciate that. We have to remember we don't pick sides. You'll see protests, you'll see rallies, you'll see this, you'll see that. Our police department does not pick sides. Our people understand we do not pick sides. Our society needs to understand we're not here to pick sides. We represent everyone. And that's what we train, that's what we coach, and that's what we see. The data you see today will be interesting. It's going to show some systematic issues in our society, and it's bigger than a police department. It's bigger than the region. It's at least at the state level that we all can come together and provide some insight and work together to get to that point. It works now. All right. To introduce those who are going to speak today. So the body worn cameras, I'm going to speak some, and we're going to have Chad Gobin also speak from utility, and our statistical data and training. I'm going to speak, Craig's going to speak, and Brett Numchuff's going to speak. And some of the issues also we're going to bring to light is some of the progressive ideas. And a lot of the members here today, the township supervisor and some of the board members understand, and they've been integral along the way over the years to push us and help us and guide us and direct us to have these opportunities, to have these special associations with special interest groups and civil rights groups. So with that, if you would, please hold the questions, and we'll provide the answers at the end. There's going to be a lot of information thrown at you, and I think it's going to drum up some good questions and good dialogue for not only today, in the coming weeks and the coming years, as we address and recalibrate as a police department. With our body worn cameras, you know, it's about transparency. Does it change officer behavior? I'm not certain. I know one thing, there's an expectation and maybe case law one day that states that body worn cameras and in-car camera systems are a must to operate a police department. So with that, we're going to talk about a little bit of the issues that we have. And with a body worn system and in-car camera system that utility offers, it's different than any other vendor out there in a number of ways. But think of a system that we have now where the body worn camera only lasts 4 to 6 hours. A system where you download information onto a CDR, you give it to an officer or detective who gets in a car and he drives 30 minutes to 35 minutes east to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Or we drive information packets up to the 35th District Court. Data transfers are going to be so much differently. Think of a police department that's more transparent, that can have forward-facing information, more timely for the public. That's some of the things you're going to see with this system. And when you look at our timeline, we purchased in-car cameras around 2001. Over time, we've improved with the same system, updated. The body worn cameras we just purchased in 16, and they're already not working properly. And one of the most important things is a critical incident at a police department is the body worn camera detaching. So most of the time, when the deputy chief reviews after everyone else has reviewed this, we're watching a camera that's fallen off and it's in the ditch. And some of the most critical incidents that we need to have evidence of what occurred for oversight and transparency, the camera doesn't catch. So keep that in mind. Our servers are outdated, and with this system, it'll be cloud-based. And our warranties have expired also. So we went out in the summer of 2019. 7 vendors submitted proposals. 4 vendors were interviewed. We selected utility as what we think best serves the Canton's needs. And when you look at the end of this presentation, you're going to see a picture. You're going to see a picture of an officer's uniform. And in a world right now when police are becoming more militaristic in their look at the difference. We look like robots now. You can barely tell we have this camera on us when we did the T&E, and you'll see a picture of that camera system. I'd like to turn it over, if we can possibly share with Chad Gobin from Utility Associates, and he's going to explain some of the opportunities that they provide for us from utility. He actually has the same first name as I do, but that wasn't a part of the reason we selected them.
Thanks, Chief. I greatly appreciate it. Is everybody can hear me okay? Awesome. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about our solution. Just a quick little background on me. I have just shy of 21 years of law enforcement experience. I retired 2 years ago from a PD as a sergeant to come work for a body-worn company. There are many reasons that I came to work for utility because I got to use the solution for the PD that I worked for and got to deploy it to our guys and really started to learn how the system works and love everything about it. When it comes to transparency and forward thinking, our solution really does do that. There are lots of things that I'm sure the chief is going to show you in his presentation of how this all works. One of the things that he hit on was the data transfer, taking guys off the street to take them up to Wayne County to deliver everything they need to do. With our solution, we actually are able to do all this electronically. We're able to save space for you guys and server maintenance. This is all done inclusive in our cloud-based storage. We have no limit it's unlimited storage. It's true unlimited storage. So when you look at this, there are so many different options that the chief and the PD will be able to use the solution in. Again, it doesn't fall off when it's in an altercation. It captures what it needs to capture. And for me, most importantly, there is a feature in here that will save officers' lives. I personally have watched it save 2, and it is most near and dear to me when it comes to our solution. I'm actually training down here in Indianapolis, Indiana right now as they've chosen our solution, and why we had it, I was training today, we actually had that function go off on an officer as he was fighting with a guy that nobody knew about. So everybody was able to respond directly to him and be able to calm down the situation and do what they needed to do, and everybody went home safely. And that ultimately is the end goal, is everybody goes home safely and there's transparency. As I train officers through this solution, the one thing I always stress to them is that if you're doing something wrong, there is no doubt in my mind the solution will show that you're doing something wrong. So you have a high level of accountability for your officers. When I came out to train Canton, I realized that that level was already there, but this now holds them to a little bit higher standard. Anything they do, it's documented. You're going to be able to see how things are done on a daily basis, when guys are doing things, and this transparency between the police department and the public now becomes so much better and is so much more eclectic that we can actually communicate a lot more. For constituents and for you as board members, if there are things going on in the city that you need to realize, you're able to do things on a geospatial map that you can actually see how long officers are spending in areas and how far they're driving. There's a lot of statistical purposes that we can use with the data-driven side of our solution. I can't stress enough of how happy I am to have left law enforcement and be working with this company to go to other agencies as well and provide this solution to them. Because like I said, there are just so many wonderful benefits. To be able to see things in real time, you don't have to wait, you don't have to download. All this information is transferred real quick, real time over cellular networks, and we have that information right then and there. Other scenarios, when you look at things, if there's robberies or a shooting, and maybe we have some video of it, we're able to get that information disseminated to all the agencies that we need within hours, not even hours, within minutes, realistically, on how this stuff transfers. When we get the prosecution side on board, then like I said, everything is even better because we can actually upload every document in our solution with the unlimited cloud storage. The agency is going to be able to put whatever they want into our solution. So they can put videos, they're going to be able to put Word documents, PDFs, all the stuff that they need to get to the prosecution. And instead of taking time off the street to drive it up to the prosecutor's office, it's really just a click of a mouse, click of a button, and they have it instantaneously and are able to look and see what everything is going on. I think you guys will see that as you go along, if you vote for this and allow them to have that and we deploy it, that you're going to see a wonderful side of the solution to where there is that accountability there and officers are going to do their job. And like I said, I think you're going to see a lot of good things through this.
Well, thanks, Chad. I appreciate you coming on tonight. We're going to show some videos here shortly, and feel free to comment on some of the things you see especially as we looked at a lot of vendors and we looked at price comparison too, which is very important. And utilities on the lower end of pricing, and they also will augment our uniforms, and we'll get into that in a second. But I'd like to show you some body cam comparison videos. And keep in mind, when you see this screen that gets shared here shortly, the L3 is identified, and Canton Cable helped us out a lot here, and they helped us put this together and try to make it not too long, but give the board some idea of what they're actually looking at and considering when we put the RVA together. L3 is identified. It's pretty obvious the difference between L3, which is our current vendor, and utility is what we are asking for consideration. You'll see a difference. You're going to see a video where a man had just committed a major felony. What you see on the ground is our officers saving his life. He had major injuries to his chest, and they sealed the wound, which saved his life. Then you're going to see some traffic stops, and you're also going to see a domestic violence incident where a lady tried to jump off a balcony. But the goal here is just to show the clarity and show the context of what our of the situation in comparison to L3. And also important is the redaction. Redaction is something that has to be done through our police department and through our FOIA department, the clerk's office. The redaction is totally different because our current system essentially is not transparent at all. So compare it from that context. So if you would, Bart, please start the video. This is down on Michigan Avenue. This is a man that's been stabbed in the chest after he committed a major crime in another city. Our officers are, this is the L3 body cam. You can't, things a little bit more blurry. You can't read the mobile mark there. You're not able to see his wounds. And this is obviously the utility. It's the officer. He's looking for the body seal. It's a sucking chest wound, so he's seal off the wound so the guy can breathe again.
Hang tight, man.
Hey, you got Juris's number on you? Yeah. I left my personal phone on my desk.
He's saying a guy now, but he doesn't want to tell us anything.
I said, no, man. I said, what's going on? I said, I got to find some good pressure on your chest. And then I just said, I got to call the cops. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't. So I called the cops. I said, good pressure on your chest. And then he fell face first out of his car. And I was like, I thought he was out. I thought he was done.
You didn't see him get stabbed or anything, though?
No.
Was anybody else with him?
No.
And this is redaction on the left that occurs with our current system, and on the right, this is the required redaction we would do for general public consumption. One of the things that takes a lot of time is actual redaction work. Here's a traffic stop. This is the current system.
How you doing, sir?
Redaction would be
Officer with Canton Police Department. I think you know the reason why I stopped you.
I squealed
You're squealing your tires, yep. Do you have your driver's license and vehicle information?
Pocket here?
Yep, that's fine. Yep. Cool. Just trying to have a little fun?
Yeah, just getting back after a long week.
Gotcha. You from the area?
Dearborn Heights.
Okay.
Yep.
Were you away on business, or?
No.
Where are you getting back from?
Oh.
This is obviously utility body camera. I believe this is a intoxicated driver video. Redaction looks for human characteristics.
Everything okay tonight?
Yeah, I was just looking for someone.
Who were you looking for? Looked like you were looking under the car.
This is my ID.
Alright. Where are you from?
I'm from Wayne.
And you said you were looking for someone.
And this is two examples of redaction for a drunk driving investigation. appreciate your patience. I think we have one more video it's going to show here, or two more videos. This was a domestic violence incident, and again, just a comparison of transparency. And you actually see some extraordinary actions by the officers. That this lady made an extraordinary decision here. They run upstairs and she tries to jump off a balcony.
I'm Sergeant Colkey with Cam. That's your driving license, buddy. Thank you. You know the reason why I stopped you?
Yeah, I was going too fast.
Yeah. Are you in a hurry or are you trying to get somewhere? Or?
I just got carried away.
Okay. All right. How'd the driving record look? Any tickets or anything?
My tickets?
Yeah. Have you ever been pulled over or anything?
Not for a little while.
Okay. All right. Let me give that back to you so I don't lose it. Just sit tight for me and I'll be right back with you, okay?
Thank you very much for looking at those videos with us. It provides some context to what you're looking at as we prepare an RBA. Our systems, just to follow up, are a little bit archaic, and there's we'll go into the rest of the report here. Okay, now look, the quote we have at this point is $660,000. When you look at the range of proposal that came to our police department out of 7, they were as low as 609 all the way up to $980,000. The quote was from 2019, and I would imagine some of these may go up, or they could maintain this current quote. The current system, it's outdated, it's archaic, and we're going to ask here shortly for you guys to consider as a board if we need to purchase another system. And remember, at the beginning of this, I asked you to take a look. You can see the difference between our current system and all the other systems have a component very similar to the one that you see on the left, the current system, and on the right is how the uniforms would be augmented and look a little bit less robotic, and our officers really like it. More importantly, we can actually capture the event. What we found so far, those body cameras like on the left, and even one of the main competitors, that's one of the most popular competitors that's out there, and some of the most publicized events here in recent times, the body cams are falling off too. And so with that, I just wanted everyone to see those photographs. And at this point, if you could save your questions about the body cams onto at the end of this presentation, I'd like to talk about our stats and some of the data that's been called for. We provided to not only the news, but a civil rights group, NAACP. And I think it's important for the board to see this. And I appreciate that Supervisor Williams to give us the opportunity to have this time to speak with you and discuss this. Remember, this is a starting point, and it's not a time for excuses. It's a time for understanding and see where we can improve as a police department. And let's start with traffic stop stats. You've received a packet, and we're trying to make it a little bit more user-friendly and look at our stats from this chart. And you're going to see that written traffic contacts were made up of primarily 24% warnings and 76% citations. And that's similar across the board for all race and sex groups. You're going to see that white males receive 24% warnings and black males receive 26% warnings. And that's pretty much the way our stats look all the time. What we need to understand as a community is the obvious. Our population is 9.2% African American males. This region, this community, the state's trying to address why does there seem to be a disparity? Why are more black males being stopped and cited? So we need to address that. This is where we start. Our traffic contacts by race and sex, you're going to see it here. 37% white male, 13% black female, and it's pretty obvious here. One of the important things to consider is calls for service. Our police department, let's say last year, neared 54,000 calls for service, and we used force 68 times. When you look at the fact that we at least saw one person on one documented complaint 54,000 times, less than 1% of the time we use force. You're going to see later when Brett Numchoff speaks about a constitutional-based training, how our uses of force have declined, and we would attribute some to that is to education, looking at case law, understanding risk, looking at de-escalation techniques and how we trained over the last 3 to 4 years. Again, with use of force, now 71% of those uses of force were related to our ability to guide someone to the ground, hold them to the ground, and direct them to the ground. When there's contact made, we're going to make that incident a use of force. Some agencies may not consider that a use of force unless they use maybe a joint lock or a taser deployment or a taser being displayed. When we take someone to the ground, we're going to use what we consider a use of force form. We're going to look at it, we're going to review it, and consider it as use of force. So 71% of all of our uses of force are guiding someone to the ground. What you see to the right is 38% of the uses of force were with black males. 22% were white males. So let's break that down a little bit further. 72 officers at our police department were involved in the use of less lethal force. The highest number of one officer being involved was 8 incidents. All use of force incidents go through a process. They're reviewed by an instructor. This has a lot of training and is a specialist at our police department. Then a shift supervisor reviews it. Then the deputy chief reviews it. Our police legal advisor in recent times will now jump in and review the use of force too. That's an addition that's coming with our police department. Right now, there's no indication inappropriate or unreasonable excessive force behavior problems or patterns. We just conducted training again. The use of less lethal force training was conducted in 19 and again 2020. When we look at arrestee demographics, so it's an important stat for everyone to understand, and this is where we start to see things we need to consider as a team, as a township, as a board, as we provide guidance, as we need to recalibrate potentially. When we look at arrest, look at the numbers. 5 top cities where arrestees come from are Canton, Detroit, Ypsi, Westland, and Inkster. 64% of the arrests are male. 51% are black males. When we look at the numbers, we're starting to see what some may consider a systematic issue with traffic offenses. We have high numbers of arrests for traffic offenses, and the derivatives of traffic offenses are warrants for people not able to comply with traffic violations and having a license that's not suspended. So when you look at our top 5 arrest categories, it's obvious: traffic offenses and warrants and obstruct. Warrants are quite often traffic warrants for people that are unable to pay for their traffic tickets. And our police department, for the 24 and a half years I've been here, we've taken nearly everyone to jail or arrest them for not having a valid driver's license. Something else that's real important for this group is, as our police department progresses and as all police departments progress in this area, are mental health calls. In 2019, we had 412 mental health calls for service. At least, it looks like 23 people had more than one mental health issues that we responded to. When you look at this, what did we do with these situations? 309 of those calls, people were placed in a hospital. So when you look at 412, only 309 we were able to resolve at that time. And Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire will talk more about some of the progressions we're making, and they started actually September 1st on how we respond to mental health calls for service and some of the services that we can offer, or at least introduced into a family unit or household or wherever the service is needed. And also Brett can talk about some of the training as it relates to mental health that we've progressed here in the last few years. And another thing you may have questions about is juvenile diversion. There's program requirements. We started this diversion program as an option, as an avenue to change behavior without introducing the child into the criminal justice arena, to keep them out of the court if we could. And we had a pretty stringent protocols, and we're probably going to open up some of the other ideas as this program matures. You know, so right now a juvenile has to live in Wayne County. The arrest can't be for a felony. It's discouraged to use the program if there's previous arrest. And if a victim wants restitution or prosecution, we don't allow the child into the program. Another disqualifier is when the parents won't participate. And if they meet all those requirements, they can qualify for the program. And what you're going to see, since October 1 of 2019, 128 juveniles were considered for the program. 43% actually qualified with all of that policy that we have in place. 12 are still in the program. 31 were able to make it through the program successfully. 12 dropped out, and of those 12, 6 eventually declined services, 4 didn't meet the obligations, and 2 had another problem with our police department. They committed another crime or a status offense. 73 juveniles didn't qualify for the program, so that's 57%, and we're looking for ways to address the first one, which is 6 actually lived outside the county, and it's funded through the county, and GrowthWorks runs the program, and they're exceptional. But 15 were disqualified because they were domestic arrest, 6 were felony arrest. And this is an arena that I think we can have the most movement in the next year. Is 33 had prior arrest. So we'll start looking at those arrests and consider that. There's a review board that has not met yet, and essentially they haven't met yet because of COVID. But there's elected officials that are going to be on the board. GrowthWorks and Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire will be on the board to consider any alterations as we review our program. Again, continuing here, 10 victims wanted prosecution so that those children couldn't participate, or the offender's parents declined. Let's look at some of the offenses. So most, as you see at the top, the vast majority had something to do with marijuana, vaping, tobacco, and nicotine. Some were disorderly conduct, assault and battery, vagrancy, and some mischief there, just one incident of that. But the majority had to do with vaping and smoking. So as we move forward, participants, maybe we'll consider, and I'll push, you know, when we look at this, opening up some of those assault and batteries or some of those prior offense, prior arrest type issues to allow the child into the program. Here's the demographics. 85% of the juveniles in the program were male. 37 white males, 9 black males. 15% were females, 1 black female, 5 white females. When you look at this, the reasons they weren't qualified is what we mentioned earlier. And that's where I think we can introduce some change and see if there's any progress in that arena. Another big topic and progress that we've made is with opiate overdoses. We're seeing an increase recently. There's a number of reasons. I can't identify it specifically, but we're seeing a slight increase in opiate overdoses and deaths. You see that we've had this for a little bit of time now, and what this was is an option when someone had that opportunity in their mind and they were ready to enter into a program, and we had set up a program and worked with some of the Western Wayne communities recently, and I think we spoke about it at a study session, but through GrowthWorks and through St. Mary's, Western Wayne recovery came to light. And through that, we've seen some success. And you're going to see that most of the participants are white male, 25 are white female. So when we look at progressive policing and holistic policing is a good term for now. We want a constitutionally based police department. We want to ensure the presence of justice, and we do this through engagement of our special interest groups, our civil rights groups. In the packet, you'll see the action plan for progress. Those 15 questions were asked of me by the NAACP, and one of the most important questions you're going to see is number 3. What is your department's use of force continuum? And I'll let Brett Numchuff speak to that, but it really talks about the facts and circumstances, not only looking at an escalating force, use of force model, but look at de-escalation. That's important as we try to have trust in the community. You don't always need to escalate force. So I'll let him speak to that. The CCIC, some of the members on the board, I know the Supervisor Williams that participated in the CCIC and the formerly called the Hate Crimes Coalition. CALEA, we've heard about it since 2007. This board's heard about it, our accreditation. We're one of the first police departments that jumped into this arena for the last 13 years. And our ability to understand mental health, not only internally, but externally. One second here, sorry. And again, I can't express enough how important Brett Numchuff has been to our police department and police legal advisors that will come in the future. Having that resource is extraordinary. You're up to date legal training monthly for the police department, not outsourced for 8 hours, maybe once a year to a select number of people, but updated legal training. And he's the best in the business. And we'll move on to the next slide here, but I'm having problems. If you can move it for me. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire, and he can speak on the Canton Coalition for Inclusive Communities and some of the ideas behind the rebranding. And I know Eva Davis is a participant tonight or listening tonight. And we've had a lot of community support, and it's opened up a lot of arenas for us to develop and progress as an agency. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. As Chief Baugh had spoken about, as we continue to be a progressive organization, trying to move forward and serve our community the best we can. We've been a progressive organization for many years. In 2009, the Canton Response to Hate Crimes Coalition was formed by the former director, Todd Muchler, to address any hate crimes that occurred within Canton. Fortunately for our community, we have had limited number of hate crimes over the past those years since that coalition was started. So as we progressed to more of a proactive model. So proactive in training, proactive in engaging the community, and just getting out there and forming those relationships that are key to our success within the community, making sure that we have community partners to address any issues that occur within the community. Fast forward to 2020, as Chief Baugh mentioned, Eva Davis is one of the co-chairs of the coalition. She has been instrumental and been on the coalition for many years. We looked to rebrand it here in 2022 because we wanted to fit the model of what the coalition actually does now. So we're rebranding it as the Canton Coalition for Inclusive Communities. So really going forward with pushing forward the training, pushing forward the engagement, and building those community partnerships with organizations who can help us if there are situations, and then also the engagement of our community. Again, we understand that without our community, we can't serve them the best that we know how. So some of the partnerships we look at is the community engagement team. That is a team within the Canton Police Department led by Lieutenant Biley. He's done a phenomenal job of increasing those engagements exponentially over the last couple of years through his team. Getting out there in the community events, and you'll see him at many, many community events. He's usually the one that actually orchestrates that. This weekend was one of the examples. Community organizations, we continue to look out or reach out to community organizations to be part of this coalition in order to give us the support and resources we need if we need to not only address but train people within our community to make it a little bit more inclusive. Special interest groups are the same. We work with Leisure Services. They're a great partner in creating, for the coalition, and creating those events and inviting us to those events. And GrowthWorks, you'll hear GrowthWorks named many times through this presentation. They've been a great partner to us in many different arenas and helped us serve this community the best we can. Some other things that again, you've heard about CALEA before. So as we move forward with the coalition, we'll continue to grow that throughout the years. COVID has obviously created some challenges with meeting and interacting with the community. So we will continue that. As we move forward with CALIA, as Chief Boss said, in 2007, we received our first award of advanced accreditation. And as we progress through this year, we're anticipated to get our 5th award. Why is accreditation so important? Currently, we adhere to or comply with 416 of the 484 standards. And the reason why we don't comply with all those other ones is because they don't apply to us. They're either something to do with campus security or other things that aren't a service that we supply to the community. The one benefit of CALIA is that annual reviews. They come in every year and review us. So they're third-party people that come in and review us, and they look at to see that we're adhering to the best law enforcement practices within the law enforcement community. We continue to evolve. It's continuous improvement. Every year there's 4 different conferences. In each one of those conferences, they continue to review the standards, and they're updated every year, at least a few standards, to make sure that we're doing well in complying with best practices with law enforcement. And then there's our on-site. Every 4 years, they actually come on-site. This year, we had an on-site. However, because of COVID, it was actually a virtual on-site. So they usually come on-site. And again, it's someone who has no connection to this community or this organization and they come in from a police person or police official from another organization comes in and reviews our standards to make sure that we are complying. So it's a very comprehensive evaluation. It improves many different things. Our annual review of our use of force, some of these stats that you've seen in the packet that you were supplied are actually compiled and supplied to CALIA. So use of force, bias-based policing, traffic stop data. This is a lot of these annual reviews that we do. Also our training program. Our training program is built around CALIA. However, we go above and beyond. Lieutenant Kennedy has done a good job of building that program after being put into the position of Special Services Lieutenant. So he continues to grow that program beyond what CALIA expects of us. You know, we train in bias-based policing, de-escalation, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk with our police legal advisor. So understanding one of the biggest challenges in law enforcement that we deal with now is we've now taken on the responsibility of mental health over the last several years with the mental health systems changing. Some of the things as an organization we've done to try to engage people who are in mental health crisis is by giving our officers better training and more training in order to be able to deal with it on a higher level. The first thing we implemented, and actually it's already started, is our crisis intervention team. We have currently 4 members of the crisis intervention team. We continue to train people to get involved. What that is the officers who are trained in crisis intervention have to first attend an 8-hour mental health first aid training, followed by a 40-hour crisis intervention training course. And this really helps them understand the plight of somebody who is going through a mental health crisis and be able to deal with them on their level and be able to talk to them at a level that can, again, going back to the use of force, this is to try to stop a mental health situation from turning into a use of force, being able to talk to them and communicate on their level to be able to get them into services and help them out. The training's been so successful. One of our officers, Officer Andes, who actually attended the first training, has now attended the trainer course, has been asked to join the team. So now she's actually a trainer for the crisis intervention team through Wayne County Mental Health. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. As far as some other things that we've done and we've looked for, again, dealing with mental health has become a responsibility of law enforcement. So we've looked to Hygera, and we've partnered with Hygera to do a co-response model. There's 2 different portions of the co-response model. The first part of the model is actually a 24-hour referral, which will start on September 1st. We started that training today. Hygera has actually done roll call trainings through Zoom with our officers who are on duty today to begin a 24-hour referral model. So what it is an officer will be called to a mental health situation. They may not be able to put that person into services through either involuntary or voluntary. So either taking a person into protective custody because they're a threat to themselves or someone else, or they voluntarily go with the officer. Sometimes we can't do that. And you saw the stats, 412 people went to the hospital. There was another 103 that never made it to the hospital. So we're trying to capture everyone, because even those ones that go to the hospital come out and have to we re-engage them through mental health services again. So what we're trying to do is engage them in mental health services within the community so that we can stop these continued interactions and get them the services they need. So the 24-hour referral is filling out a form, sending it to Hygera. They will actually follow up with that person and get them into services within 24 hours. That portion of it is actually going to start September 1st. There's a second portion of that, which is a co-response model, whereas if there's a person in crisis and we don't have enough information or ability to put them into services or take them volunteer, they don't volunteer, or we don't have enough to take them into protective custody, we can contact COPE, and within 2 hours, they will send out a team of a licensed clinician and a peer support person to be able to come and help them deal with this mental health issue. So those are some of the things that we're putting forth to try to help us engage the mental health, somebody in mental health crisis, and deal with them properly and get them into services so that we can stop those repeat offenders as far as that goes, with people who get them into services. Another partnership we do is rescue recovery. As we said, as Chief Boss said, the heroin overdoses have started to rise, and again, they go through it ebbs and flows throughout the years. Rescue recovery is a partnership between, again, GrowthWorks and St. Mary's, where it's, if we find somebody through an arrest or they present themselves to the police department, they're in crisis and they ask for help, we can call a peer recovery coach. The peer recovery coach can come, get that person, take them and get them into services. So get them into a detox facility immediately. So those are some of the things that we continue to work on. They are a trained peer recovery coach, and there's a couple different models out there. This one actually has a 1-year follow-up with that addict, the person who went into services. So they continue to follow that person and continue to give them services for a year after. And it's seemed pretty successful within our community. So as I've talked about, one of the key things is training. As you heard, I talked about training for mental health, talking about training to comply with CALEA. One of the great things that we brought to this organization is a police legal advisor. He's been a great benefit to this organization. He's been giving us great legal training that has put our officers heads and tails above everybody else when it comes to knowledge and legal procedures and protocols. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brett Numchuk.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I wasn't planning on being here, but I got invited, so I'm here with the crew. Let me start off by saying this. You in Canton have a professional and progressive police department. I'm not just saying that. I've seen them actually act in a professional and progressive manner. So from this point forward, you can be happy that as leaders of the municipality, you actually do have police officers who walk the talk of being progressive and professional. But then again, anytime anybody's talking to you, you need to know a little bit about them. And so now is the point of the program where I spend about 1 minute telling you about myself. My name is Brett Numchuk. I'm a police legal advisor. I travel to different municipalities around the state. Generally, I'll work from 8 to noon in a spot, then I'll travel to another spot, work from 1 to 5, and do that during the course of the week. I have 27 years of police experience, and I've been an attorney for 20. So there was an overlap there when I was both in law enforcement and an attorney. During the course of the 20 years, I've served as a police legal advisor. I've been a union lawyer and general counsel to public and private entities. I'm admitted to practice law in the state of Michigan, the 6th Circuit, and before the United States Supreme Court. I started off doing a lot of teaching. I taught human resource law, labor and employment law at Central Michigan University. As far as the law enforcement training goes, you've heard of Northwestern Staff and Command, Eastern Michigan Staff and Command. I've taught use of force, criminal procedure, discipline, and police civil liability at all those places. The interesting piece of the puzzle is civil liability is entwined into most everything that the police officers do. In addition, I'm a national coordinating attorney for the Professional Law Enforcement Association, which is a group that provides legal representation to police officers when they're in a deadly force encounter. In Michigan, you don't hear the term police legal advisor all that often. That's because police legal advisors are in higher numbers down south, out west, and out east. For example, Michigan has almost 600 police departments, but the average number of officers is only 29. Whereas you look at Florida, that has 387 police departments, they have an average of 119 officers. So when you have a municipality that has more officers, there's a higher need for somebody to be around every day as a police legal advisor. With you guys, I contract with you guys for 4 hours a week 16 hours a month. And during the course of that time, we engage the officers in all those pieces of the puzzle that are down by there at the end of the screen. We deal in the legal aspects of law enforcement. You can ask me, as a lawyer, I know that stuff. You can ask me about a trust, I have no idea. Ask me about a will, I have no idea. You ask me about a municipal ordinance on air conditioning, I have absolutely no idea, nor do I want one. My job are those things on the end of the slide there, the legal aspects of law enforcement. That includes use of force. When can a police officer use force? Deadly force. When can a police officer use deadly force? We update them on criminal law. Search and seizure is an important piece of the puzzle. Being able to testify in court, properly write a report, know when somebody has these things called Miranda rights. And you know what? You need to have an awareness of what someone's civil rights are as it relates to creating liability. So we go over these type of things as a police legal advisor. In essence, that's my bailiwick. That's what I do. And as I said, I travel around because there are really no police departments in the state of Michigan that need a guy like me for 40 hours a week. You need a guy, clearly you need a guy like me, right? I hope. But the reality is you don't need one for 40 hours a week here in Canton. What do? Well, Canton Township, and here's one of the reasons I like Canton Township, is they believe in the constitutional holistic policing model. The constitutional holistic policing model is based on educating officers on all the tools that they have. Number one, it teaches police officers they have to understand their role in society. The role in society for a police officer is not tough guy. The role in society for a police officer is a helper and a problem solver. They have to solve the problem presented using what is called a holistic approach. We just talked about it there in your, for example, mental health treatment. If we have to go to somebody's house time and time again because they have a mental health issue, well, let's get to the root of the problem. Let's help them. Let's identify what other options there are out there that can help so this person doesn't have to, family members have to keep calling the police. If somebody's got an alcohol problem, the same circumstances exist. I absolutely love your juvenile diversion because that's what it's all about. If we can keep these kids out of the criminal justice system, there's a stronger likelihood that they're not going to be back into it and they're going to have a more successful life. To do that, we have to have the resources like you guys have with the partnerships that you have for the mental health and with your diversion program. A holistic and constitutional policing program is based on the constitutional principles. That First Amendment, which is big right now, right? First Amendment, you have the right freedom of speech. Second Amendment is the one that talks about weapons. What are we finding now? Police officers are having to deal with people who are peacefully protesting and other people who are following their rights too, coming with guns. We also have to understand that police officers' main issue that they have to deal with is making sure that they have an awareness of and work within the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is related to search and seizure. The Fourth Amendment is related to police use of force. And that's really where most civil litigation for law enforcement is in that Fourth Amendment. So we spend a lot of time going over that. The Fifth Amendment is the Miranda. We always hear that on TV. You have the right to remain silent. Well, people have a right to remain silent. Let's let them know when they have that right. There are no secrets. And with the constitutional holistic policing model, it's about education. Not only educating the officer, but also educating the citizens so they understand what's going on. This is perpetually reinforced, educating the officer, educating the citizen, because when a police officer goes to a call, they have to make that decision of just because I can make an arrest, should I make an arrest? Yeah, you might lawfully be able to do it, but maybe in this circumstance, instead of taking the person to jail, an appearance ticket is probably the best way to go. Maybe instead of writing an appearance ticket, maybe it is a warning. And here's an example. If you have an individual who is 16 years old and just got their driver's license, and they were going 51 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, that police officer could pull the car over, write that 16-year-old a ticket, which would have an impact on their driver's license. And what would it do to the insurance for the parents? It would end up going through the roof. Well, instead, that officer said to the kid that was exceeding the speed limit by over 15 miles an hour in a residential area, said, "Are your parents home?" "Yes." "What is your mom's phone number?" "Such and such." "I'll tell you what, why don't you dial your mom up? I'm going to tell her what happened here. And if we have a successful conversation with your mother, then that will be that, and we'll let you guys handle this in the house." I was the officer that did that. I did that because I understood that writing the kid the ticket was what I could do, but was that what I should do? That is an example, and I hate to give examples from my law enforcement career, but that's an example of when an officer has to make a decision between could versus should. Oddly enough, I saw that mother at the dry cleaning store about 2 years later, and she still remembered me and had that positive understanding of law enforcement. The key with constitutional holistic policing is that we have to remember to teach the police officers to use those tools that aren't found on their gun belt. It's not necessarily the taser or the firearm or the spray or any of those tools they have on their gun belt that they learn about in the academy. The best weapon they have, the best tool they have is their mind. Now, back when people got, back in the 60s, you had law enforcement officers that just got out of the Vietnam War, and hey, guess what? You're now a police officer, here's your badge and your gun. When I started in 1990, you went to a police academy, and they said, oh, hey, guess what? You're riding with Chuck tonight, Brian tomorrow, and you're on your own on Monday. There was no field training program. Well, what we have to do is remember that the best weapon is the mind. And that's why with your guys and everybody that I'm involved with, we want to teach them to be thinkers first. They think when they're going to the call, what can I do to try to de-escalate this? What can I do to try to make this a positive experience? There's no question in my mind that we have to use the tools that we are given in society. You guys have great tools that aren't on the gun belt, and it comes with teaching your officers to actually think first. Canton, you do have some top quality trained. We want our people to be the best trained, the most prepared, and to be objective problem solvers. Not just solve the way that their dad would have done it 25 years ago, but take into context what's going on in society today, what opportunities we have, and how can we solve this problem that we were called to in a manner that is objective and fair. People say, well, what, now Jeff, what do you do during your 16 hours a month? Every month, I attend every shift briefing. During the course of 2019, we had 72 shift briefings. Now understand that normally law enforcement has a 1 8-hour training session a year. So think about it. If in May you have a training session and you don't do it till that next May, some things might have changed that you don't know about that will create liability for the organization. So, hey, it's 2020. We can stay in contact. And what we do here in Canton and my other clients is every month there is a written summary of the new case law and changes that come out, followed up by a face-to-face with me at a briefing where we have a PowerPoint that is also put on your Power DMS. During the course of that monthly briefing, they can ask me any question that they want, which sometimes I would limit the questions that they can ask because it's a little stressful to say, okay, do you guys have any questions? But I say that and luckily we're able to work through it. But if you look at 167 police questions were asked of me during 2019. Going back up to the top, 56 times we've talked about use of force and deadly force reminders. Chief talked about the document with the 15 issues on police use of force, all right? In 1989, the United States Supreme Court said the police use of force using a continuum is not fair. It's not fair for the police officer and it's not fair for the subject. Why not? Because it is, by virtue of its name, it's an escalating matrix, which simply means this: the use of force continuum says that if the subject does this, the police officer can do one more step above what they do. So if the subject swings at the police officer can punch that person. Here's the scary part. The use of force continuum, if you were to follow that as being the law, if someone takes a police officer's taser, the use of force continuum would then allow that officer to shoot that subject. Now, that's just not right. So the fact that people are relying upon the use of force continuum, I wish they would take a step back and be trained like Canton, because Canton, we train on the law, constitutional based. It's a case called Graham versus Connor, who in 1989 said, hey, guess what? Police use of force would be judged on the totality of the circumstances and a police officer's objective actions, taking into consideration all that is before them, all that they knew and all that they were subjected to. So for example, if the police officer is 6'6", 280 pounds, trying to arrest a 5'1", 105-pound person, and that person says, oh, hey, I am going to resist arrest and tries to pull away, the use of force continuum would allow that police officer to spray that person or throw that person on the ground. If it's a 105-pound police officer and a 105-pound subject, same circumstances, and they want to fight, well, then it would be more reasonable for that police officer to use spray or to use another tactic to take that person into custody. So therefore, the use of force continuum in and of itself escalates where things need not be escalated. When it comes to deadly force law, police officers in the state of Michigan are held to the same standard as a regular citizen. MCL 780.972, that police officer must have an honest and reasonable belief that they needed to use deadly force right then to protect themselves from an imminent, right then, threat of death or serious bodily injury. Right then. Crazy part is, in 1985, there was a law that allowed, hey, police officers, if you can't catch someone who's committed a felony, you can shoot them. So somebody who's a burglar, a property crime, running away from a police officer, if the police officer couldn't catch them, the police officer could shoot them. That was in the United States of America in 1985. Now, of course, that's changed. That changed, and the use of force continuum is not the law now, nor was it ever the law anywhere in the United States of America. In fact, there's only a few states that even still mention the use of force continuum. So Canton, using the constitutional-based holistic model and this thing called objective reasonableness, is ahead of the curve because they're teaching their officers how to use less force and de-escalate based on the circumstances that they're providing. Additionally, on there's 15 projects that we did during the course of the year. And I had another slide that listed all 15, but suffice it to say there were 15 projects that we were able to complete. But people say, okay, Namcha, if you're saying that, show me some proof. Here's some proof. Mental health calls for service. You have at least one a day. Our officers are going to at least one of those a day. Well, during the training of the monthly legal update, I'm talking about this case called Rudolph versus Babenik. And it was a mental health crisis case where the police officers took someone into custody and ended up getting sued. While doing that training, I've got some blank stares in the audience. And then the blank stares came to, what is this guy talking about? So it was more just not knowing, it was being confused. Babenik made it clear that for someone to be taken into custody for a mental health crisis, they have to have the same standard for taking them into custody for mental health as you do if it's a criminal arrest. What did we find? We found that both our policy here at Canton needed to be tweaked, but most importantly, we found that our practice, what we were actually doing, needed to be changed to actually follow what the law says we're supposed to do. You know what this ended up doing? This ended up making it easier for the officers to make decisions on the road because they then understood what the standard was. Crazy piece of the puzzle, subsequent to this, I've talked to many police departments and I've talked to some academies. When police officers are in the academy, they are not taught that probable cause is the standard for taking someone into protective custody. If they don't get it in the academy, They're not going to get it anywhere else. So we've had police officers in 588 police departments who just learned in the Sixth Circuit in 2019 what the law is. Why do you mention this now, Jeff? Because if you only have training once a year, you're going to go 11 months with that's what the law is, and you're not going to know. So therefore, you might make a mistake. Canton Township police use of force, I'll tell you what, that's some impressive numbers. 2017, before we came on to board, you had 203 incidents. After our first year with this constitutional and holistic policing model, there was a 48% decrease in your police officers using force. Why is that? Because they have the tools to use. It's now about thinking, not grabbing as much as it used to be. And to look from 2018 to 2019, there's another 35% decrease. So in 2 years, the use of force used by the Canton Police Department has gone down about 67%. You take those stats and you compare them to anybody in the United States of America, and we're going to be right up there with them, if not beating them. And you can take that to the bank, as Beretta used to say. Canton Township's constitutional and policing, holistic policing model, there's certain goals, right? And Chad and Craig not only buy into these goals, they live these goals. Number one, be public safety leaders. You guys have to continue on your course. You're on your way there. They want to build a professional problem solver, not a tough guy, not a guy who automatically is looking for a way to grab somebody or beat them up. They're looking for somebody who's a problem solver, a thinker. They're looking for ways to identify and encourage alternative dispute resolution. What can we do to solve the problem without having to put somebody in handcuffs or take them to jail? Now, there's times where that has to be done, there's no question. But when that doesn't have to be done, what can we do? We have to increase perpetually the awareness, the officer's awareness of the constitutional rules. If they don't know what the rules are, they may violate someone's rights. If they don't know what the rules are, they may not know that there's a tool that they can use. So therefore, we have to take what was usual and customary in law enforcement. Well, we've always done it this way. Guess what? Those days are over with. It's now for new and fresh. Constitutional and holistic policing is the new and fresh in law enforcement. The next goal is they have to adjust their response alternatives. Remember the could versus should, the little thing I gave you about the traffic ticket? Your officers are making those decisions on a daily basis. And most importantly, the constitutional holistic policing model sharpens the most effective tool, the mind. Now, I got news for you. There's some police officers that think I'm crazy when I say that. Well, guess what? I may be crazy, but I'm right about this. The best tool a police officer has on their belt or otherwise is the ability to understand what the law is, the interplay of the law with the way that society is asking them to act at an appropriate time, taking those two, using the mind, and making sure that they understand people's constitutional rights is what the constitutional holistic policing model is. Canton Township follows that model. And as I said in the beginning, I'm now closing the circle. You guys can be proud because you do have a professional and progressive police department. With that, I don't have anything else. Where do we go next?
I don't know. I think it's going to be me, Brett. I wish I could see more passion out of you. That would help. We're going to ask for some questions here. I'd like to close too. You know, we first started talking about camera systems, and along the way, I'd like to thank Wendy Trumbull for her help, and we're going to try to find where that money could come from, and I think we're going to be able to find it, and we'll present that information to you very soon. I think you see that we're building upon a strong foundation. You've seen some great leaders in this organization, and it's continuing now, but more importantly, you have excellent employees that want to progress and want to learn and want to be a part of the solution, want to solve the unrest that's in our community and locally. And it's very concerning that there's people out there right now that don't understand that there's the presence of justice when they come through Canton. And we're going to work to support those solutions. And I think one of the participants today is also someone from the MIDC, and they've been critical along the way too in the last 6 months to a year, just helping understand what's coming in the future. And I think some of the things that may be coming may help solve some of the systematic issues that are going on. And we're ready for recalibration, and with the support and the leadership from this board and the township supervisor, we're ready to recalibrate where needed, but we're not going to change just for change's sake. We're going to look at the situation and make sure we're making great decisions. So again, I just want to thank you for your support, and I think we're going to have a few questions here. Who would ever like to start? I'd like to turn it over maybe to our township clerk, and maybe we can work through some of the questions. Is that possible? Or
should we have any hands up in the audience there, like the public to comment and ask questions or make statements first, and then we'll turn it over to the trustees.
I have a hand raised. I will. All right. Ahmed, go ahead. I assume Ahmed, go ahead and talk.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Chief and Deputy Chief and Legal Counsel for your presentation. My question was around the data that we saw on the Black males in particular that were pulled over. And I was just wondering, thank you for being so transparent with the data. And my question was, have you thought about what would reduce the disparity?
One of the first things that comes to mind is legislation would help too, besides our reaction to the legislation. But I think you're going to see in due time some of the misdemeanor traffic offenses for non-moving violations. I would assume, based on what I'm seeing, is they're going to move into the arena of civil infractions. There are obvious social economic issues that exist throughout the state, and certainly within Canton and some of our neighbors. But I believe the actual physical arrest of another human will be decreased, especially people that are disadvantaged, if the law changes from a misdemeanor to a civil infraction. In the 60s and the 70s, there was a transformation in law enforcement where the motor vehicle code went as maybe one of the most primary functions to investigate crime. And that exists today, and it's very important to investigate crime that way and to educate our officers and understand Fourth Amendment requirements that they exist. But certainly that is one of the things that I see coming in the future. Also, bond reform will help. It's already helped the stays, how long someone stays in jail, but absolutely some change in legislation as it pertains to non-moving traffic violations.
Thank you, Chad. Michael, I saw a hand raised from the Michigan Indigent Fund Commission representative. MIDC.
Thanks. I am actually, this is Lauren Kogali. Hi, Michael. I cannot turn off my Michigan Indigent Defense Commission logo. I have no idea why. I'm not representing the Indigent Defense Commission in this capacity, though we certainly have had a very good working relationship with the Canton Police as well as the court. But just as a citizen of the Plymouth Canton area, I would echo what Amina said. I appreciate the transparency. I think this is really critical to problem solving. There are two things that just occurred to me. One, I'm just curious, when you're looking at the statistics with respect to warrants that result in, the initial contact with the police, where there's not an obvious traffic violation, what's prompting the police initiated contact on the traffic warrants?
So I think there might be a couple of questions intertwined there. I think what we see quite often is a primary traffic stop, the officer making, let's say it's a red light violation or speeding or a lane violation. There's a primary stop. You'll see in Canton quite often that primary stop is not cited, and they just cite the individual for driving while license suspended. Essentially pretext cop. It's not uncommon for officers to learn through computer systems and other resources that the person, the driver of that vehicle, is suspended. And that is probable cause also for a traffic stop. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's helpful. Thanks. I guess I was just, part of the reason I was asking the question was just thinking about in terms of what training looks like, or trying to sort of identify solutions, identifying sort of where the, you know, initial contact is happening, I think is helpful. The second just quick question I had was, when I think about sort of as an attorney myself, right, often I think of when we look at policing, or anything for that matter from a legal perspective, right, our job is typically to advise on what minimally has to be done to make sure we're in compliance with the law. And then secondly, helping advise or make decisions when there are you know, issues that present themselves that could result, you know, in a violation of the law. And so I guess I'm just curious, and I think that was a wonderful presentation, but I'm curious, you know, thinking sort of about the legal parameters, what, you know, what proactive steps in the context of sort of the legal advisor role are given to the police department?
Well, I heard my title, so that's obviously coming to me. I guess I don't understand your question, so if you could ask it again.
So I guess my question is this. I think the tendency is, when we look at legal issues, is to advise on compliance, right? What needs to be done to be compliant with the law, right? And so I guess the flip side of that is, if part of the purpose of having this conversation today is to look at, you know, to be proactive about identifying solutions, I'm sort of curious how, from a legal advisor perspective, you're approaching that sort of proactive piece rather than just the compliance piece.
That's the whole theory behind constitutional and holistic policing model. We want them to have the information so they can make an informed decision. So when it comes to that could versus should, they're making a decision not just based on what they can do, they're doing it based on a number of options. For example, if an officer runs a license plate and the person has a suspended license, the officer could take that person into custody, but should that officer take that person into custody? So we train the officer to look at the whole perspective. Well, number one, I hope these things become civil infractions, because I think there's too many arrests that are made based on the fact that somebody has a suspended driver's license. You have all the systemic reasons for someone having a suspended driver's license that come into play. But what we want our officers to understand is that there's more to the picture. There's actually a big picture. We want to educate them on all the options that they have. So then when they're making that decision, it's not just strict, I only have one choice. We want them to be educated on the whole bouquet of decisions that they can make.
I think building upon that too, Lauren, is the officers in this police department are being trained to transform. This is what this meeting is about. Is the community also ready to tolerate that? You're coming off of 30 years of suspended, you go to jail. That's essentially what we're looking at when we see the disparity in numbers. Are we going to do that as a community? That's just one example for consideration. So it's could versus should. Are we ready for that? And it may be an easy decision because you can't go to jail in the future, most likely for suspended driving.
Well, I hope for that too. I hope we see those reforms sooner than later. And I think, right, in the meantime, it ends up being, as you identified, about sort of prioritization.
Thank you for the question.
There was a question online. Chad, were you able to pick that up?
I was not. I'm sorry.
Maybe is it possible to put
I
that?
can read. Do you want me to read it?
Please.
Pat?
Yes, please.
All right. When you were describing use of force stats, and you mentioned lesser than taser deployment instances of use of force, where other departments might not report them, is the starting point for an instance of use of force you were referring to instances where the arrestee is physically brought to the floor by an officer? Or is it any sort of instance where verbal demands are not being complied with and any sort of physical contact happens considered an instance of use of force? And then there's a follow-up question. Who reports whether there was an instance of use of force? Is it self-reported by the officers?
I think I can answer most of this in reverse. Yes, it's self-reported. Quite often you will find a supervisor on scene after a use of force. Any use of force would be physical contact other than just traditional quick cuffing. When it causes some type of maneuver by the officer, there is a use of force. That's what they're trained, that's what we do. It's supported by, you know, the camera system when it's the one we have now working, but in the future, the one that's always working. Yes, other departments, I know some organizations that, for instance, it may be not feasible for them to report a use of force every time they pull their weapon out of their holster. It just would be too cumbersome. They wouldn't even be able to complete their jobs. We are fortunate where essentially 25 to 30% of our time is proactive time, where it's not reactive. So we have time to report everything we do. So essentially that is the best way I can answer that question. We have time to report everything we do properly.
Mike, do we have any other guests? We have another question, or no? Thank you for answering the question. Is there any additional questions from the public?
There is a, okay. Amina has another question about how much the department cooperates with the Department of Homeland Security, and specifically, what is the policy around detaining people for ICE?
I can answer that. We do not seek out violations for ICE. If we come across someone that has a want from the federal government, we will contact them to see if they want to come retrieve that person. Our relationship with the Homeland Security Department, we actually have a group seated in this building that primarily focus, nothing to do with immigration, but primarily focus on money laundering and large financial crimes. That is a force multiplier for this organization. It answers a question for the township with large fraud cases that span outside this region. But as it relates, I know for certain, I've seen it firsthand, they do not actively seek out immigration violations.
There is another follow-up question. Thank you for answering my question from Ahmad. A second question I have. CALEA is a credentialing authority through the joint efforts of law enforcement's major executive associations. So it's self-policing, correct? It's not exactly an independent reviewing authority, question mark. I imagine there is a revolving door of sorts, question mark. Are there other citizen oversight agencies that you know of?
I'm going to let Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire answer the CALEA component of this, but I will answer the last question when it comes to civilian oversight or citizen oversight committees. We don't have one at this point. We're open up to any of those ideas, especially when we want to become more transparent. I know the supervisor and some of the members of the board have mentioned it prior that they may have an interest in that. So to answer your question, I think that's something, an opportunity in the future we should consider and design it properly. There's certain mechanisms within a civilian oversight board that's critical for its success and the success of the organization. But anyway, I'll transfer the question to Deputy Chief Wilshire.
Actually, CALEA is we do self-police to some form. We have to follow all their standards. CALEA itself is an independent body that comes in and evaluates us. So they are reviewing us. They have no connection to Canton Police Department. The people that come in here have no connection to Canton Police Department. It is voluntary, so we actually pay a fee and we volunteer to actually follow the 416 standards that we follow. They're very stringent on following those, and they want you to adhere to policing, the best policing practices throughout the the world. So there's an international accrediting body that has no connection to Canton. So it definitely is independent of us.
Any additional hands raised? Public questions?
I see none.
Okay, let's move now into trustee comments, questions at this time. Who would like to go first? Anne Marie, Summer, Steve?
Sure.
Steve?
Oh, Steve, go first. Go ahead, Steve.
I guess I will go first. So thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really informative. I appreciate all the presenters. As well, of course, police all, of course, appreciate all the work that the Public Safety Department does and has done over the years, and how you've been willing to work with the community and the board as representatives of the community in terms of discussing issues. So thank you for that. I'll start with a technical issue because the other Chad looks bored. Mr. Gobin, I was wondering, you mentioned that the cameras real-time upload data to the cloud. And one question I think was answered, it's done over cellular. Is it also done over Wi-Fi when there is a Wi-Fi available?
Yes, you're correct. So there's also smart waypoints that can be put on the outside of the Canton Township building. So we can use the cellular as the officers are driving around, but if they do pull in to the PD or to the building, it can offload via the cellular, or the Wi-Fi, so it doesn't bog down the cellular or use the cellular data during that time.
And is the cloud something homegrown by your organization, or is it one of the commercial clouds available to corporations and people in general?
Sure. So our cloud is done through AWS, Amazon Web Service, but it is the GovCloud version. So it is for government agencies. It also meets CJIS compliances for all those agencies that revolve around the GovCloud of it.
Okay. So I can't watch the stuff with my Amazon Prime account.
Correct. Correct. Everything's encrypted end to end, and it's all the department data. We just supply it. All the data belongs to the police department. It's not ours. It's not anybody else's. Nobody else can watch it. The police department controls everything that they want to do with it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Chief Bond and your teammates there. I had 4 questions. One, and these are just things that I may have missed during the presentation, but let me know. One is on the diversion program, why do domestic arrests not qualify? Or did I get that wrong?
A domestic arrest, it's really how we handle them in Canton Township. We want review. It's based a lot on risk. It's based on tradition. It's based on why the domestic violence law in our minds came to be long ago. And we went from an agency, everything goes to the prosecutor's office, and in recent time, everything still goes to the prosecutor's office. We want to look at it and consider it potentially for juvenile diversion, but we haven't got to that point yet. And there's no great excuse for it because I don't think we haven't been ready to jump off that cliff yet, because there's so much risk with domestic violence, and it's essentially the way the law was written from years ago to protect victims of domestic violence. So we're open to it, we just haven't been ready to jump off that cliff yet.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand this is typically underage juveniles. So when domestic violence is mentioned, many times it's thought of spousal abuse of some sort, but I just have to remind myself that in many cases here, we're talking about juvenile on juvenile or issues or children on parent. And so it would be something good to look at, not to say that there's always a good answer. So I understand what you're saying. Going to the mental health options that you gave, are those in addition to, and this is not the diversion program for juveniles, this is the adult side of things. Are the mental health options that you
Froze up, Mike, Steve.
We're having a technology issue, Mr. Supervisor.
that makes sense?
Okay, we lost you someplace in the middle, Stephen.
What's that?
We didn't get the end of your request there on the adult. You're muted right now.
Yeah, sorry, my space bar is not working. Now it's back. I must have froze up there for a second. I guess my question was, are those options in addition to prosecution, or is it also like a diversion process or program?
Well, with mental health, depending on the situation, there could be a situation where there would be no prosecution just based on the compliance of the victim and the wants of the victim, depending on whatever the crime is. Like back to your first question, if it's domestic violence, it would be parallel interventions, both on the prosecution side and on the mental health side. It's not uncommon to bring a prisoner into the Canton Township Police Department and there be a mental health crisis also parallel to the situation, and we would serve that need also through a hospital or a resource. Also, the mental health opportunities in the future, just those situations, and we'll probably expand it, and we probably will overwhelm Higuera, but we will offer these opportunities to nearly every situation we go to, because not only will, when we go to these situations, is there intervention for the primary person, there may be ancillary resources that are needed in the family. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think we're at the tip of the iceberg with this. I think in the future you may see a request for Canton employees actually to be social worker, a few in this organization. So we're open to a lot of ideas, but we want to incorporate data whenever we bring that information to the board. So we got a long ways to go in that.
Okay, you just mentioned my next question was, have you considered mental health professionals on staff? So it sounds like it's something that we're just starting to look at and discuss.
Right, Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire, he probably could speak for a few minutes on it. He's a little ahead of the game on this. He's been looking at this for at least 2 years that I know of. And I'll let him probably speak to some of the examples that he knows about. We wouldn't be the first agency, but we'd probably be one of the few first in this region, that's for sure. But out west, it started long ago. So
yeah, so based on some presentations that I've attended in the last couple of years, I've noticed that police social workers become an actual position within a law enforcement agency. So that is something that we continue to look at to see if that's a need within the organization, handling things, again, another tool to handle mental health. Child protective service issues, follow up with somebody, a senior or somebody who is in need. So a lot of different things that are a lot of utility to having somebody with a social worker background, and again, stuff that a lot of times, you could use somebody else besides a law enforcement officer to go handle, or get somebody into services and help them the best they can.
Okay.
One of the considerations I'd want the board to think about too, I'd like the primary focus on an emergent situation to be the police officer, but also that police officer be able to transfer that need to the right person. But sometimes these situations are so extraordinary, it wouldn't be appropriate to not have a police officer be the primary responder to the situation.
Yeah, all good things to be talking about in the 21st century. My last question probably is for Attorney Nomchev. I liked a lot of your examples and the alternatives of what you could versus should do. The one about calling mom, the only question I have actually from the other side of things is, in that theoretical, well, it wasn't theoretical, you did it, but if we had that type of practice, would that be recorded somewhere so we don't, Officer Smith knows that Officer John had them call mom a week ago and that didn't really have much effect, and now Officer Smith is facing the same thing? Would he know that Officer Jones already tried that?
The beauty of the Canton communication system through that Power DMS is the ability to to do just that. If that was going to become a practice here, then we would have to let the guys know that when this occurred, we have to somehow document it so other officers know.
Okay, yeah.
Because you're exactly right. Okay, well, 5 times, Mom might not be doing what she said she's going to do when it occurred. But that is exactly what we need to do. And you guys have the capabilities through the way that the officers communicate at shift change, but most importantly, that power DMS and the other main communication methods that you have.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Anne Marie?
Hi, thank you. Bear with me, I grab my notes. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative as usual, and I know it has a lot of great work put behind it, and transparency is important to us in our community. I'll start back with the batteries. I noticed that there was the cameras, there was a 5-year warranty. Is that on the whole suit, or is that just with the batteries? Because I think, Chad, didn't you say that one of the biggest issues with that camera suit was the batteries going bad?
Certainly, yeah. That's one of our main day-to-day operational problems, and I believe Chad can speak to the warranties, but that would cover the camera, and I believe during the contract we also receive a new updated camera about 3 years in. So Chad, if you could speak to the warranty real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the warranty on that, the chief's right. 37 months in, we upgrade the cameras to the latest and greatest of what's going on, because obviously, the batteries do go bad, especially after charging all the time. But what you guys would be purchasing is really, you're purchasing a service. We're really a SaaS company. You're purchasing a service. We're providing the equipment. And anytime something breaks, all I got to do is call technical support. We do the RMA. We send a shipping label. You ship it to us on our dime. We ship back a new one within 24 hours-ish, and everything's back up and running. Also, with the deployment, we also leave extras, just a couple extras. So if a camera does go down and it needs to be shipped back, the department isn't left with anything, with an officer that doesn't have a camera. They have a spare to be able to outfit that officer and ship the old one or the defective one back so we can replace it, and then just keep that cycle going. So the warranty is there for all 5 years.
All right, great. That's good to know. That would help us. It doesn't seem like we had it with the current vest, and that was an issue. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Now, getting on to some of the data that we saw, when you look at the data, are you able to map where we saw some of the data in terms of what region of Canton it happened in? I mean, do we have it to that level?
We could go back and take a look at that and look at some of the GPS components. Maybe we could look at our RMS system and capture that data, but we did do it for this presentation, and we haven't done it for CLIA at this point.
Thank you, because that might give us another look at at what we can do, some solutions that might help us. So as we saw in the diversion data that you showed, the girls are still highly not qualifying for the diversion program because of domestic violence. And I know Stephen brought it up, and I'd like to, take a little bit more on top of that. And where our lawyer friend, Mr. Numchek, talked about could or should, we should maybe even bring him into the discussions of the domestic violence, whether could versus should, in the future. I know that's kind of like a big thing to bite off right now during this meeting, although maybe I'd like to meet and talk about that, to find out about how we can marry the domestic violence arrest of the girls, the juvenile girls, and how we could look at the could versus should, and maybe what other opportunities we have there. So that's one thing.
I think everyone in this room agrees with Ann. We haven't had the courage to make that step yet, because it would be a big step for our police department to divert domestic violence.
Right, and it's a tense for both sides. Yeah. I think but definitely, I think we need to start. Another thing is I had talked about before, bringing in the schools, because that's a lot of where we see some of the juvenile arrests with the pipeline to prison. We know we have definitely data that the schools have with showing how many kids end up on that pipeline to prison so we really need to watch that data and form a partnership with the schools, because I think if we start working with some of these issues more upstream, we won't see as many kids in the juvenile justice system. So somehow in that discussion, let's marry the school's data on some of the expulsions and even some of the arrests that might happen. Congratulations again on the opioid substance abuse program. We know it's increasing, unfortunately, and it's good to see that people are taking advantage of it, and hopefully we keep getting resources to continue that. But I guess, Mr. Numchick, does domestic violence fall into your training at all? I'm just wondering. I know you talked about.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay. Could you give me a little bit of background on that and what you train for that?
Well, domestic violence are, I don't know, they're as prevalent as the mental health crisis calls. But what we've taught the officers is they have to be able to identify whether there's this thing called probable cause, facts and circumstances that would lead a reasonable person to believe that this person is involved with this type of criminal activity. But most importantly, we have to do a complete investigation. It's not just what one person says versus another person. Maybe we will go to a call and there's some neighbors outside. Well, we need to talk to those neighbors. We also need to talk to the victim and find out, hey, what's the history of this? Has this been going on before? So really, in short, we're doing a full criminal investigation to get the totality of the facts and circumstances before they make a decision on whether making a custodial arrest or not. And I think in times past, in fact, I know in times past here in Canton, there wasn't the complete investigation where we actually spent time talking to the neighbors. Hey, what did you hear? What did you see? Talking about how long that this has been going on. Have you been hit before? So in essence, getting the totality of the circumstances in the mind of the officer that gets on the piece of the paper that eventually goes to the prosecutor to decide whether charges are issued or not.
Okay, just to let you know, I mean, domestic violence is increasing. I mean, in our community, in all communities, especially with the COVID and people being at home more. So there definitely is an increase there. So just to let you know, that might be something you might want to, partner with us on talking about a little bit more. But I also want to say, you talked about having the police be able to de-escalate and discern mental health issues. Understanding mental health goes both ways, right? We have police officers that go into areas where, I mean, you showed a video. He's running up the stairs to stop somebody from jumping over the landing, hurting themselves. I mean, that's pretty tense. So we've had several meetings like this over the years, and we've talked about some of the mental health of our officers, because of course, healthy police force means they're going to approach situations in a healthy way, and hopefully we will begin to have a healthier community around that. So what are we doing with our police peer counseling? I mean, after incidents like this, to help them de-escalate so that they stay healthy, so that they, react in a healthy way to our residents also. So what are we doing with that? Is peer counseling going on to help?
Well, you should ask that. I'll relay it to Craig here, but we're in training currently today. Was it today? Yeah. In our basement, in the admin building, training with a doctor. I'll let Craig speak to his credentials about our peer support team, and that's been in place and it's progressing. It's slowed down a little bit with COVID because we've been waiting for this training with Dr. Jenke, but if you could speak to it a little bit.
Yeah, so we identified that, again, that is an issue that our officers in the past have not received the proper debriefings or mental health assistance that they needed in order to live a healthy lifestyle. So one of the things that identified through Lieutenant Harrison, he's now retired, was a peer support team. The peer support team was created within the last year. However, in order to be a qualified peer support team, they need to have a certain amount of training. And Dr. Jenke, who's formerly ran the Michigan State Police peer support team, is the doctor out of Plymouth who's actually training our officers to have those qualifications. So we continue to take incidences where officers have been exposed to trauma or situations that the normal person wouldn't be exposed to, and there's usually a debrief afterwards, trying to work through and make sure that the officers have the ability to talk out the situation, have an understanding, and if they need anything further, we would refer them to further evaluation. So we continue to look at that as an issue, and we want to make sure that our officers are having the ability to, again, if they are exposed to some situation, that they have the outlet and the ability to speak with somebody who can help them through that situation.
I'd also like to take the liberty, and Brett Numchuff actually helped me design a new response to officer-involved shootings. I know firsthand how those responses go when they're not handled according to a script, meaning services. And he does this throughout the state, and we've done it here in Canton. If you could speak real quick, Brett, about what we did and introduced into this organization so everything is handled not only legally properly, but supported by professionals.
I absolutely love the fact that as a group, you guys are talking about the mental health of everybody involved, including the officer. One of the things that we did here in Canton was put together an officer-involved shooting play card. On one side of it, it talks about the rights, responsibilities, and expectations of the officer involved. Then the next column is what are the rights, responsibilities, and expectations of the first responding officer, the first responding supervisor, the internal investigations officer, the police chief. But most importantly, that document, when you flip it around, and let me tell you, this document looks so nice. I was in Louisiana speaking to the Louisiana Troopers Association. It's such a nice looking document, not to mention the substance. Those guys hijacked it from me because they want to copy it because it looks so nice. So the reality is, on that back page, it's a 2-page document. It talks about what the officer can expect. And we have some things that we've learned from police psychologists about some of the things that will go through their mind shortly after an officer-involved shooting, but it also tells the officers what is the sequence of events going to be now that I've had to do this, be involved in this horrible circumstance. And that provides a piece of the mental health picture that I think that you're looking at. But most importantly, in Canton, they have it had it run off. Everybody has a copy of it. I'd love for them to show you a copy of it, Anne Marie, because if you're on the same wavelength I am, you're going to say, this is fantastic. So many times I've been to an officer-involved shooting where there hasn't been a pre-plan or a card. And then you have officers not knowing what is expected of them, not knowing that they're going to go on administrative leave, not knowing that, guess what? The fact that you're not going to sleep occurs. The fact that you're going to run it through your mind occurs. All those things that in the past, officers have just been expected to deal with are now right out there in the open where we're paying attention to it. And that play card we put together reminds them of some of those things.
And I'd like the board to know that that was put together by those of us who have been involved in shootings before. And, you know, for transparency, Brett's been involved a few times in his career also. And those experiences are very helpful when you're putting together a program that's, you know, not only are you protecting the organization and risk, and also ensuring that those that have been affected by this and the person actually that's lost their life or been shot by the police, their rights are protected. But we progressed a little bit here at the police department, and we're learning about what's happened in the past and progressing a little bit, because I can tell you firsthand, you're out on an island for a month or two by yourself, and it's not fun. And that's what we did here. So
there's one more piece of the puzzle that I think is worth mentioning. You have the officer who's involved in the shooting, but so often the municipalities don't think about their wife and their kids. And Canton does think about their wife and their kids. And our plan is, if we ever get in an officer-involved shooting, we're going to remember that the wife and the kids are part of the Canton family and need to be taken care of, because guess what? They got stress too. They got sometimes more stress than the officers. So I think the program that Chad has initiated with the other officers you've had involved in a shooting can then blend into when officers are going to an infant death, when officers are going to have to deal with a suicide. So the officer health issue, it was originally addressed in the officer-involved shooting protocol, but I've seen it bleed into understanding that officers might need to talk to somebody after they see something horrible that they see during the course of their career.
Right, right. And I'm praying, I'm hopeful that there's not going to be any shootings in Canton going forward, but there's other issues even, you know, trying to rescue a baby who's just drowned or stop somebody. I mean, there's other issues that could trigger mental health requirements. So I'm glad we're on that path. One of my last questions, Craig, Officer Craig, so Kalia, I think what the person meant in the chat is, you know, he's basically stating that Kalia consists of law enforcement and executive associations, and he would like to see something like maybe add volunteer citizens as part of the group. So is that a possibility? So rather than just police organizations looking at a police organization, can it maybe include another organization, maybe like the Michigan Indigent Coalition, or a group of citizens as part of it? That's what he's saying.
It's part of the plan. It is part of the evolving plan.
It is, okay. And okay, that's good. That's good to see that it's, so that's what I believe his question was. And also that we're looking at getting citizen input. And also, is Kalia looking at changing some of their processes or procedures based on what's been happening in the country? Are they re-looking at how they rate police organizations?
Yes, they every conference they look at standards that are you know, applicable to the current climate within law enforcement. And actually, Kalia is actually involved with the federal government now in the police reform. Actually, the president of Kalia was one of the advisors during the most recent evaluation on police reform through the federal government. Okay. Craig Carter.
And the last question, I guess, has so Chad. So based on the data, what is your opinion of the statistics? I know you said, you know, we have a long way to go, but what would be your first step in trying to move towards what you think we need to do?
I think one of the first things that we need to consider as an organization, and it's been, I can't express it enough, if COVID ever helped in any arena, it's helped us realize strict enforcement of driving offenses, maybe not the answer. We're seeing some positive results with precise allocations of our resources. We're a lean organization to begin with, and to tie us up with processing people for non-moving violations may be something to consider moving forward. We've already done it since March 12th when I sent a directive out. That's something to consider, but our community's got to be ready for it. It means traditional 4,000 plus arrests a year are going to turn into 2,500 arrests maybe. So that's something to consider. That's going to be it's going to be impactful. But we program a police department based on service, and I would argue service becomes first, business second, and we're going to be focused on service. And I think it's one of the first things when I look at the stats, it's quite obvious there's a social economic issue that's being impacted by law enforcement in the state, especially any one of us in this county. And there's no excuse for it necessarily. It's just a starting point for us to consider moving forward.
Thank you for your candor. Thank you. Thank you.
Summer, you're muted now.
Thank you. Director Baugh, Deputy Director Wilshire, I just want to thank you both for your transparency and being proactive and willingness to engage on a difficult issue. I think there is a lot of people that are afraid to even broach this topic because of what's going on in the world, and they don't want to inadvertently step on any toes. I think it's a really brave thing to do, to put out data that says that we're less than perfect, but we're looking for ways to improve and look at some of the systems that have created how we've gotten to where we are. You know, you look at the data of the Black males who have been stopped and subsequently arrested in Canton, and it's less than ideal, but I do appreciate, I think, your willingness to look and see, is there something that we can do on our end, or there are changes that need to be made on a state level? And, you know, I think try to rate the situation. I do have a few questions. I do, also want to thank you both and to thank Supervisor Williams for sitting down with me a few weeks ago and going through some of this data. And, I think we've had a few conversations and being willing to answer some of my questions. If you could pull that slide up again that talks about the calls for service versus the use of force, can we possibly go back there?
Yeah.
I was trying to write it down really quickly, but I couldn't.
Everybody has got this data now, correct?
I do have it. I just don't have it fleshed out in this PowerPoint.
I think it'd probably be fair to say this comparison here makes it easier to look at.
Yeah, this was a lot easier than in the raw data that we got in our packets. So I have a question about the calls for service versus percentage of force used. So in those calls for service, we include things like if somebody's car was broken into or somewhere where they're like not in physical danger, like use of force wouldn't be expected, right?
That's exactly true, and I think I know where you're going. That's a good point. Continue, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say if we could, I think it would be helpful for the board to see the percentage of use of force for instances like domestic violence or, if there's a robbery or, something like that where you would expect that force would be used versus like non-confrontational calls.
Okay. I think we can produce something like that. We'll probably include non-traffic stops also and actually traffic stops.
Okay.
And you might want to know arrest situations, how many times force is used. Essentially, you can just take that number and it's around 4,000 arrests.
Okay.
Take it to the next level, Chad, because like example 2019 data.
Right.
Let's get a summary. There's only 68 there. Let's get a summary on each and every one of them.
Right. Yeah, to be simple, we just haven't done it.
Thank you. And then if we could go to the slide that talks about the Juvenile Diversion Program, I'm really concerned about the number of folks that did not qualify for the program. And so I know that some of those folks were outside of Wayne County, 6 were outside of Wayne County. And Director Ba, I think I told you this, I had a conversation with someone with the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, and they did say that they were open to a conversation to see if they could do something to support Washtenaw County residents who end up, with a juvenile offense in Canton. But I'm also concerned about the domestic arrests, particularly those kids who maybe get into a fight with their brother or sister or, a fight with their parent, particularly because I don't think being put into the prosecutorial system and spending a night in jail is the answer. I think at the heart of those incidents, they really need the support that our juvenile diversion program can offer through GrowthWorks with the counseling and with the life management skills and some of the anger management skills. And I'm also curious, I know that we have eliminated folks from participating that had prior arrests, but I'm wondering, what those arrests were for, and if there's any way that we can be a little bit more lenient in who we allow into the program.
I don't think I disagree with anything you said. I'd like to look at the prior arrests, certainly. I'd like to bring GrowthWorks into the equation when we talk to Washtenaw County, because that'd be great.
Yep.
They understand the grant, how that's funded, and maybe they can, Washtenaw can come up with something to assist us too. And domestics, I think I'm hearing that our community is ready for that when we look at juveniles. So I'll reconvene with my staff and I talk to the supervisor how that looks, and we're probably not far from getting where we need to go in that arena.
Yeah, I think I told you this, that my main concern with the the kids in Washtenaw County is that there are a number of students from Washtenaw County that do attend our high schools. And so just want to make sure that we are not treating Washtenaw County students that are within our borders differently than Wayne County residents, if we can help it.
Right. Right. The beauty of the program is it's zero cost. You know, as I just stated, service programming, or you go back to the business programming, it's zero cost to our community with this program, which is excellent to hear. And it sounds like maybe Washington will be open to participating. So look forward to.
Yeah, I will make that connection as soon as we end this meeting. I do have another question about Higuera, and I'm just curious about why we chose to work with them. I know that we work with GrowthWorks with the Juvenile Diversion Program, and we work with St. Joe's Mercy on the Opioid Recovery Program. So I'm just curious, do they provide something different or more specialized than some of the other agencies that we work with?
So the reason Higuera was chosen, Higuera actually already has co-response pilot programs out there, and they're actually the ones who operate COPE, which is the facility where we take our people who are in mental health crisis. So that's why we've chosen to partner up with them in the mental health arena, because again, they offer those services, and that's who we actually utilize in time of crisis for a person. And we actually take them to the hospital.
Okay. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, so I know that after the George Floyd incident, with Western Wayne County, what's it called? The group in Western Wayne County, they did the listening tour in partnership with the NAACP, the Conference of Western Wayne. Sorry, that's what I was trying to come up with. And I know that they asked a number of questions about the diversity breakdown of the police department and recruitment and retention methods that we are currently using. And I don't know if you wanted to go into some of that. I know some of that is in the data that the board got, but
Right.
I know that the community is probably interested in that data.
Currently, we're authorized for 96 police officers. Right now, we have 5 African-American police officers, 1 Asian Indian police officers, 9 female police officers. We just had a lieutenant retire, so we're down to 92. We're recruiting, and I'll have Craig can speak to our recruiting methods, but the way we operate in Canton, we look for certified or certifiable police officers, and we have focused our recruiting throughout the state of Michigan at police academies where people are going through the police academy currently. So they'll be certifiable at their graduation date. We also have recruited at universities in the state of Michigan. That's the extent of our recruiting. We have a recruiting team that's made up of a pretty diverse group of officers. And I'll let Craig speak to that to some degree. He may have some more feedback for you.
Yeah, so one of the issues we have in law enforcement is the competition. So there's a lot of open positions out there with very few candidates, qualified candidates. Lieutenant Kennedy had put together a recruitment team, and actually in the past 2 years, he's actually sent our recruiters all over the state. So we've never traveled to every single academy within the state of Michigan until the last couple of years, based on Lieutenant Kennedy's recommendation. So we're able to draw more candidates, a more diverse group. However, once that group applies, gets a job offer, they not only have a job offer from Canton, they have a job offer from multiple other agencies. And sometimes they choose to go to a place that's closer to where they grew up or closer to where they're more familiar. So again, it's an ongoing effort on our part to continue to reflect our community, and that's a goal that we've always had. Again, we still have room to grow in that arena.
I think just for an analogy or some example for everyone here, my understanding, the police academy that I went to, which is locally, had 56 officers pre-service. Probably there was 40, and there was probably a couple hundred people applying for one job here. We don't have that anymore. It's much less. The numbers are low. I think right now, how many people are in the police academy that are registered?
Schoolcraft College Police Academies, there's only 30 applicants. I think Macomb only had 10 and I'm not sure about Oakland County at this point in time.
So another thing that Director Meyer and Deputy Chief Wilshire really spearheaded here recently was public safety service aide position, which it takes typically a person that's in college, and for lack of better terms, they're a turnkey, they're a jail keep. They help with prisoners, they process prisoners. And after a period of time, our goal is a year, we will sponsor them to the police academy. And that program seems to bring some good applicants. Diversity is still our problem, still our question. To reflect our community, we really have, personally, I've spoken to our Asian community, and we still have yet to have a candidate make it to our police department. We've loosened our restrictions for beards. You're seeing bearded police officer. We reflect now our community a little bit more there. We still have a higher standard for tattoos in some agencies. Some people use that excuse. I don't even know if that's a true excuse, but that is something that comes up from time to time.
Thank you. So I was looking at the data that you provided to the board about the agency breakdown related to race and executive command supervisory positions and non-supervisory positions. And I noticed that in the first year that you saw accreditation with CALIA, you had 2 executives, 16 commands, and 16 non-supervisory positions that were white, and 6 positions that were Black, and 1 that was other. Also, and then if you skip to the 4th year, you had 2 executives, 16 commands, and 64 non-supervisory positions that were white, and again 6 Black in the non-supervisory positions, and 1 that was classified as other. And I'm just wondering, like, what is the path to moving up, to moving into a supervisory position or a command position? And what are we doing to move folks through the chain of command? Because the numbers seemed a little stagnant. And I recognize that it was only 4 years, but.
Well, that's very true. It's one thing that we probably should mention too is female police officers rising through the ranks to command status. And right now we've had limited applicants for the sergeant position, which is the first stage of supervision that ultimately will lead the organization from the administrative positions in the future. We have had in our history 2 female officers that became deputy chiefs, which I believe the first one was one of the first ones in this area. That was not the Detroit Police Department or the state of Michigan. But when it comes to African American officers or an Asian officer in our police department, they recently are the first ones ever to work in our police department. So you first have to build a resume, and we have a few of those officers are really doing very well to build that resume, show their worth as a great police officer, and we're seeing them potentially develop in that arena. So they all have to test just like everyone else, and I'm sure they'll do very well. But right now, I believe our first African American officer started in 14, so 2014. So you're looking at 6 years. That's very early for a person to become a police sergeant. Okay. I say we're within the next 5 years, you'll probably see that, and I wouldn't be surprised in the next 15 years or so, you might see an African American officer running this organization.
Thank you for that. And finally, so I've had conversations with you, Dr. Baugh, and you, Deputy Director Wilshire, and the supervisor about my support of having an independent community citizen-led group to look over some of this use of force data. I know that you have, Director Baugh, indicated that it's important to have somebody with a legal background that also sits on that commission, and I think that's a really great idea. And I'm looking to you and the experts in this area to help us create a model that would be responsive to citizens, and that can provide some more of this transparency to the community. Additionally, I am in support, just want to throw this out there, of having some mental health professionals within the police department. But I do see your point about making sure that the police officers are the ones to lead when they're going into some really sticky situations. So again, thank you very much for this presentation. I appreciate it all, and I'm willing to help or engage in any way to see that we move forward in a great progressive way.
Thank you for the questions.
Mr. Supervisor?
We lose our captioning.
Mr. Supervisor, one moment. Yeah, we lost our captioner. I was going to verbally ask any of the attendees if they would require any other accommodations, and I'm also going to type it into the chat right now, because one of the provisions of the exemption for the in-person OMA is that we do have closed captioning provided for individuals who require it. Now, the recording of the video will have closed captioning when we upload it to YouTube, but I am asking if anybody would like to write it in chat if they require closed captioning, and I am typing it right now.
Okay, we'll give you a minute to get that done, Mike, and see what the response is. If somebody needs it, then we'll shut the meeting down. If there's no need for it now, then they'll pick it up with the video.
I am sorry, I am unaware.
No problem. Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. Thought it was unusual. Guy was wishing us good night prematurely.
Okay, nobody has typed anything or said anything, so.
Okay. We will make it right with the video. So that's good. Okay, thank you. Summer,
Sorry for interrupting, Summer.
Summer, did you comfortably end there? Were you?
Yes, I was done. Thank you.
Excellent. Steve, John, anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing to add except appreciate all the effort. Chief, you did a hell of a job. Stats speak for themselves. Recruiting is always going to be a problem, especially in the diverse community. Just about every police department that I've talked to has a problem with minority recruiting. Your efforts seem to be top notch, so continue on and promoting and hiring the very best officers, candidates that are out there. And thanks again for all your help.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Diane, is there anything like to add?
No, all of my questions were answered. Again, a very good presentation. I want to thank you very much for all of the information you've given, and even in the packet. It was very informative. I appreciate all the transparency, and I look forward to some of our changes that we're going to be making. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional comments?
I'll take some time if I may. Were you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Go around the page.
Excellent. I'm familiar with the body cameras, so I don't need to ask about that, but I do appreciate the presentation. It was really helpful to see what the product that is being recommended is versus what the current technology is. It is light years ahead. That redaction no longer completely distorts the quality of the video. I think that's important. And so I was really excited to see that. I really enjoy the technology because it makes complying with Freedom of Information Act requests substantially easier. I get that information out from a transparency standpoint, and then do it in a format that is, both accessible for individuals who want that information, but it's also relevant. It's in a data format that's relevant in the 21st century. So that's exciting. Outside of that, I did want to kind of touch on the diversion, because I do feel like it's very important that we allow for as much participation as possible. When I see parents, one of the reasons why specifically women, the girls, right? Not women, they're girls, can't participate in the program is because of a lack of parental involvement. That is a problem, and I'm I'm good friends with Jeff Getting, the county prosecutor in Kalamazoo. And one of the interesting things that they've done recently is a trauma and domestic violence court they set up. And the impetus for this was an individual who had engaged in domestic violence, was released from prison, came home, killed his children, his wife, and then himself. And it shook Jeff to his core. And there were all the warning signs in the world there that this was going to happen. And so it got him thinking about, what do you do with that? What do you do in that kind of a world? The simple thing is to call it evil and then just say, well, we'll try to fight against it. And that, satirically, I saw last night on Twitter, somebody say, I want to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs, right? Like these zero tolerance 1980s and 1990s styles of trying to handle crisis have abjectly failed us. Zero tolerance has failed and the war on drugs has failed because we trying to force the world to exist the way we want it to, and it just doesn't do that. But what they did is they came up with 2 heat maps, and they said, let's look at all the domestic violence cases in Kalamazoo County, and then let's also look at the juvenile cases. And lo and behold, the same houses in the same neighborhoods that had domestic violence were also having addiction and adolescent behavior, adolescent criminal issues as well. And so what they said is we can try to deal with this by handling it from the criminal end. But in general, these families aren't separating. The trauma is getting transferred throughout the family. And boy, I think Kalamazoo probably has a fraction of the amount of trauma that Wayne County does. And so I think, it's unfortunate right now that state and county budgets are going to be devastated because of what we're going through with COVID-19. But there's a real opportunity for us, I think, to look at an opportunity to do something like this. Because if you try to handle these kind of kids being adjudicated and criminal behavior in adolescence, and you try to handle it from like, these punk kids are really acting out for no reason at all, I think we'll probably not be very successful. I think you have to attack it from a family end, because stuff doesn't typically happen in a vacuum, right? Behavior just doesn't crop up out of nowhere very often. And so I think it would be really helpful for us to start looking at ways to solve this from a family end, because it would be very nice to in a sense, create the conditions that would force parents to allow their kids to participate, because those kids are going to have criminal records now because their parents either lack the ability to have them participate in this program or are disinterested in having their kids participate in this program. And that really bothers me, because the Free Press a couple of days ago had an awesome article about adults who are going up to camp up by Petoskey to try to get through the trauma of being incarcerated as juveniles, because believe it or not, sending kids to juvenile detention facilities and then eventually prison does long-term traumatic damage to their brains. And that stuff carries on into adulthood, and then we all spend tens of thousands of dollars incarcerating them for the rest of their lives. So I'm worried about those young girls who should be diverted now, should not find their way into the juvenile justice system and then eventually the adult justice system and then become a burden to society. I worry about that. And it's very important to me, because most people here know, primarily because of politics, but that I'm an adjudicated youth, right? I went through the criminal justice system here in Canton, believe it or not. And I was incarcerated for 30 days at the age of 18 for a crime I committed when I was 17 years old. I think it's really important that we have accountability, right? And so, but what I would do is I want to talk about the fact that under our current diversion model, I would have not been a candidate, primarily because I had committed multiple infractions, right? I had a substance abuse disorder, I'm an alcoholic, and a drug addict. I'm in recovery now, and I haven't drank in over 15 years, and I don't need applause for that, but I have changed. And so the question is, well, how did I change, right? Why am I not a recidivist? Why have I had a decade and a half of success? I'm an elected official. What changed in my life? And a lot of things. But I had a very interesting conversation when I left lockup in the administration building, on the other side of the administration building here in Canton Township, with a person who is currently employed by the Canton Police Department, Officer Vogt. And Joe said to me when I was in front of him, having lied to him about my behavior that night, and broken a number of laws and had a history of breaking a number of laws, he said to me, Michael, I'm looking at your record and I'm going to tell you something. You're an alcoholic and you're a drug addict. And I know people who are like this. And they can change their lives. And I think you can too. And so you were driving without insurance. I'm going to write you a ticket for that. And you did not yield to that traffic signal. I'm going to write you a ticket for that. And you've got a drinking, an OUIL on your record. And I'm like, not even 21, right? And I'm not gonna, you've been incarcerated. You went to jail for all intents and purposes, but I'm not going to give you a new operating under the influence of liquor ticket. Do this. And that changed my life that night. I mean, I had to deal with the consequences. I was already on probation in Jackson, and I was on probation in Canton Township for other issues I had done. And I had to account for all of my behavior. But I was afforded an opportunity that night. I was given leniency. The attorney who was helping tonight talked about the discretion that officers can use in charging and things of that nature. And I think it's very important that we provide that discretion, but it's also an opportunity for bias to creep in, because my story is not going to be the same story that every young boy or man in Canton Township would have the opportunity to have. I served on the school board. Surprisingly that they elected me to that, given my past, but they did. But when I was on the school board, we had the Office of Civil Rights watching how we treated young boys, specifically African-American boys, making sure we weren't doing a disservice to them in how we were disciplining them. And I learned through that process that routinely authority figures tend to overage young African-American young boys. They're older than they are. We think young African-American girls are more experienced than they are and are more willing to talk about things that are inappropriate from a sexual component because of internal biases we as a society have about the African-American community and what that means. So if young white Michael Segrist or young black Michael Segrist are in front of the same officer with the same age, maybe the same mannerisms and behavior, they might be treated differently. And it's important to me that the chance I got is allowed for everybody, regardless of who they are. Because that changed my life. That changed the trajectory of my life. And I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be claiming my time today, having this conversation today, if I didn't have that opportunity. And so if we're going to allow officers more discretion in how they do citations and things of that nature, I think we have to make sure that that we do extensive bias training. I know we do. We are working on that. But I'm a big fan of what we're doing here in Canton Township. I love the diversion program. I would like to see us offer it for individuals who have engaged in multiple criminal activities. I don't want to expunge my record. I am not ashamed of who I am. I will carry that with me for the rest of my life, because in the end, I almost died, but it saved my life. I don't need to expunge my record. I'll never put my head down. I can look myself in the mirror and I can sleep at night for who I am as a person. I'm on the board of directors for GrowthWorks. So I won't speak to the work that GrowthWorks is doing with us because of a conflict of interest in that regard. But they asked me to serve there because of my past as well. So I have turned my mess into my message, right? I have been able to transform myself and by proxy, hopefully help other people. And I want to see more people like me in this community. I want to see them from every aspect, every racial segment and ethnic segment in this community as well. We're doing good work. We have a lot of work to do, as you've talked about today. Chad, I'm really excited about the mission you have with the police department right now. I think that the way we are looking at this from a constitutional perspective is huge right now, right? It's huge because I'm a nerd. I'm the clerk. I run elections. I have like on my bookshelf right there, you will see all of like the founding documents of this country and modern political theory right there. I totally believe in today's society, in advanced democracies and constitutional republics, we only exist because a bunch of people decided they couldn't do things individually that they have asked us to do collectively. People have created police forces to keep them safe. But if we get outside of the scope of our mission and we start performing services that the populace doesn't want, well, then we are outside of the scope of our mission and we are outside of the jurisdiction we are granted. We are only exist to serve the population and provide a service they want. And increasingly, people are more skeptical of the work we do, especially in the African-American community when it comes to policing. So we have to be ever vigilant in challenging ourselves for that. But good work here. I'm proud of Canton Township. I'm proud of the Canton Township Police Department. Talk too much, I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's important to realize today was about words and talk and maybe some stuff we wrote down on some pieces of paper, but it's the action and support the authority that's granted to us from this board and the community. We have to act. And I think you summed it up very well there, Michael. Thanks for sharing. That's impactful stuff. We're building a strong foundation and we're going to do this together. I look forward to it. We have a great foundation. This isn't something we just dreamed up. We're on this cycle here and we're really going to make some huge leaps in the near future. And I thank you for allowing us the ability to recalibrate customs and focus on why we're actually here. And that's a performance service to our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Okay, to wrap things up, could you please, Chad, forward the PowerPoint presentation over to the GrowthWorks team tomorrow for me? I've got a meeting with them 1 o'clock on Friday. I'd like you to sit in on that as well.
Okay.
Appreciate it. I think that we've gone around the full gamut. Michael, is there anybody online with a hand raised would like to make a comment not related to any of tonight's agenda? Is there anybody who would like to make public comment now at this time, not related to anything we've talked about tonight?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, one more time. Would anybody like to make a public comment not related to tonight's agenda? We need to move public comment to the front of the meeting, not the back of the meeting in the future, please. All right, that covers our agenda for this evening. Well done, Chad and team. A lot of good things to think about. And I think Chad, we've been given an assignment tonight to relook at the, stay-in programs or diversion program a little harder. And that's I think pretty unanimous coming from the board tonight.
Yes, sir.
All right. May I call for a motion to close?
Moved. Oh, support.
All right. Roll call vote to close our meeting.
Anthony.
Yes.
Aye.
Graham Hudek.
Aye.
Hagerstein. Slavens.
Aye.
Snyderman.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye. Well done, everybody. Thank you. Be safe out there. Good night.
Thank you. Take care.